morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here and to kick off the spring training series. I am Susan Kennedy. I'm the Regulatory and Reporting Manager for ESC Spectrum. I'm located actually in Pensacola, our Pensacola office. So happy to be here.
All right, take it away, Susan.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate that. So do like to give an overview of what we are going to talk about today. I do want to introduce myself, my team. Do want to touch on a few regulations. I mentioned there's quite a number of them rolling around, so I'm always interested in just about everything. Hard to keep up with it all, actually. I am going to touch a little bit on startup and shutdown. Also provide some information on the ECMPS 2.0 reporting system. That's the emissions collections monitoring plan system. Touch on span and range, quality assurance, quality control plans, which do affect your SIMs, as well as monitoring plans. Chat a little bit about audits and things I'm hearing there, and then end with some update or some discussions on compliance in general and permits. So as far as the introduction goes, I've many of you that I saw who are registered, I actually know several of you. I did spend 25 years in the electric utility industry. The most recent 15 or so was doing air compliance and permitting. So that is my background, including SIMS management, managing our SIMS systems, or helping to manage our SIMS systems. Let me put it that way, because it takes a lot of people to do so. Prior to that, I did other types of compliance work, water, waste, as well as some wildlife management also, but made a decision to go into air several years ago, and have enjoyed it ever since, and have been working for ESC Spectrum for, I guess I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary, so happy to be here. I do have a team of 9 regulatory and reporting engineers, and that do support primarily our data acquisition systems, but also our regulatory programs for monitoring. They are experienced in both DAS products, Prism and StackVision. We also help with state and federal reports. For those of you who do reporting, you know there are those that go to the state and those that go to EPA. We also have experience reading your Title V permits and helping you determine what is needed regarding monitoring, specifically continuous emissions monitoring. We also help with QA/QC plans, generation, update, as well as monitoring plans, and then also serve to answer regulatory questions for you. I'm very proud of my team. I will say I'm very fortunate that we have several people on this team that have backup. I know that many of you that work for certain organizations, you're probably the only one, or could be the only one, or there may be 1 or 2 of you. So I'm happy to have 9 folks with me, and that 10 makes me. So it's a good team, and we are here to help you when needed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump into MATS, Mercury Air Toxic Standards. This is a current regulation that affects predominantly coal units, as well as those units that burn oil. And so we did see last year a residual risk and technology review, which is required every 8 years for EPA to relook at a rule. And this particular rule was proposed. I have not seen the final yet. I try to keep my eye close to the Federal Register, but am not as on top of it as maybe some of you are who may be actually commenting on this rule. But I will say it was based on a RTR, or residual risk and technology, from 2020. And in this proposed rule, we do see a suggested lowering of the filterable particulate matter standard from 0.03 to 0.01. One thing that's very interesting to us as SIMS vendors, we do see that PM SIMS is required or suggested to be required, and that those of you who use PM testing or parameter testing, that is no longer allowed. And the thought there was that when the rule was first promulgated, I was around when that happened, that PM SIMs weren't as reliable or people didn't trust them, so they wanted the option to do testing. And at this stage, PM SIMs per EPA's evaluation is that they are reliable and that they can be used at these sites. Also, we do see for those plants that burn lignite, slightly different coal to bituminous, subbituminous, they have a higher mercury standard, but the EPA is suggesting that it be lowered down from 4.0 pounds per trillion BTU to 1.2, which is what the current non-lignite coal plants have to meet. So there is an alternate startup definition that very few plants are using, so they're suggesting that that needs to go away. And what we're seeing currently is, depending upon the requirement, compliance deadlines either from 3 years to 180 days. And for those of you all who also track all the compliance associated with MATS, there are work practice standards that are used to show compliance with the rule, but there is no changes to work practice standards that we see at this time. So that is currently proposed, have not seen a final yet. Not really been able to keep up with the comments on it and get a sense of where exactly that's going to wind up, but that's what I see. So moving on, there is also another rule that does not impact the entire country, but pretty much a lot of states. So those of you in these states should be familiar with this rule. This is the Cross-State Air Pollution Rule, also known as the Good Neighbor Plan, or GNP. You may hear it as that. And this is in reference to ozone and protecting the various states, air compliance for various states associated with pollution from other states, cross-state, and it is specific to ozone season, May 1 to September 30th. It started in March of last year, and at that point in time, they added new states to the existing program, and it began last year. There was also a new limit, which is different for trading programs. We have an acid rain program. We have this good neighbor rule program. And so this was something that was brand new, that EPA proposed that there would be a limit for large coal facilities with controls, with SCRs of 0.14. This is important because right now, our interpretation is that it is required to be reported starting 1/1/2024. The compliance piece of it does not start till ozone, but EPA is collecting data for this daily backstop. If you are in a state where this is applicable, you would need this in your data acquisition system so that you can report this month. I will say the GMP is hard to keep up with. Got a lot going on, a lot of cases. I am an engineering manager, not an attorney, so I'm a little shy when I put this information up, but what we are seeing is a lot of cases, and some case, and in this case, you'll see some states being pulled out of the Good Neighbor Plan, and either being pulled out completely or being pulled out and put back in the original plan. So this gets very complicated. I've got this here as a reference. More recently, we see EPA sort of, I call it the EPA strikes back, where they are continuing to disapprove state implementation plans. That's what SIP stands for, and actually pulling states in. States are suing, they're jumping out or jumping over to a different plan. EPA is continuing to regulate. They are pulling other states in. It's sort of crazy. And I do keep a list of those states that are in and are not at the moment. So it should be very interesting. We also do know, I've got a little small note down here that there was a case that went to the Supreme Court. My understanding is that we should see a ruling on this in June. The thought is that since, I'm going to paraphrase the case, since there are so many states that are being pulled out of the current Good Neighbor plan, it shouldn't be applicable at all because it goes across all state lines. And so everything should be stayed until all of these court cases are worked out. So I do know that when I chat with EPA about this, they're sort of waiting to hear what happens from the Supreme Court. So we'll see. A lot going on. If you have any questions, specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss. I don't want to think you could probably do an entire webinar on this particular subject as well, and maybe many of you have sat in on a few. Do you also want to touch on the greenhouse gas rulemaking that we saw last May? There was some proposed limits for coal, existing natural gas boilers, existing gas-fired turbines, as well as new stationary combustion turbines. And so what we're seeing is something that some people might consider fairly extreme. EPA feels that it is flexible. So that's take that with a grain of salt, or you can provide some opinions about that. But the coal limits do, depending upon how long these facilities are predicted to continue to operate. We see things for carbon capture and natural gas co-firing. For existing natural gas boilers, pretty much letting them routine operation as long as they don't increase their emission rates. Existing gas-fired turbines, also seeing carbon capture, and as a lot of people may have heard about hydrogen. Hydrogen's the new thing, and so EPA is suggesting hydrogen co-firing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also new stationary combustion turbines. These are guidelines, phase limits based on their actual capacity factors. So I'm going to jump into, actually, this is the latest and greatest with respect to existing natural gas fired turbines. These are larger, greater than 300 megawatts, 50% capacity. The rule from May suggested a couple of pathways, a couple of options. This is EPA showing some flexibility per their own language. So as you can, I've represented this so it's easy to see that the suggestion was by 2035 that the existing natural gas, larger turbines, would be able to have highly efficient generation. Their standard is listed there. CCS is carbon capture. So they're suggesting that the 90% carbon capture, if they wanted to use carbon capture as an option, depending upon their facility. And then another option for them would be the hydrogen co-firing. And so by 2032, there would be a 30% co-firing with a standard of 680. And then by 2038, 96% co-firing with a standard of 90. So pretty aggressive. And interestingly enough, something that I had not seen before, and I've got that highlighted, Administrator Reagan, through the Biden administration, did actually announce that they were going to open up a non-regulatory docket, and such that they were actually going to pull the greenhouse gas standards, suggested guideline standards for these existing natural gas-fired turbines above 300 megawatts out of the final rule. I haven't seen the final rule, but this is what has been communicated from EPA, so that they can actually take comments and come up with ideas that would be better suited for natural gas-fired turbines. They will pull that out, and presumably sometime next year there would be some new guidelines, some new options for existing natural gas turbines. We can sort of wink, wink and say, oh, yeah, after the election, maybe that's why they're doing that. Not exactly sure, but their goal really is to reduce greenhouse gas from gas-fired turbines, and they want a stronger, more durable approach for the whole fleet. So this is something that's interesting that we will see. I'm, as I said, still waiting to see the greenhouse gas final rule come out. I believe it's supposed to be this month. So lots of stuff going on there. And then I do also, for new stationary combustion turbines, those of you all, just a reminder that depending upon your capacity factor, there would be a phased-in approach right now uh, for your compliance for greenhouse gas. If you're a lower capacity, less than 20%, you have use of low emitting fuels with a pretty low standard there that's relatively low. If you're intermediate capacity factor 20 to 50, the intent is highly efficient generation with a limit there. And then moving forward, suggested hydrogen co-firing with an even lower limit. If you're what we would call baseload or greater than 50% capacity, we would give you a standard that we've seen before, and then also proceeding for phase two, and the phases are based on years into the future, where you would have highly efficient generation with hydrogen co-firing or potentially carbon capture if that works for you. So this is what we see as well. I did want to touch a little bit on national ambient air quality standards. This does not, at least immediately, have a direct effect to your data acquisition system or your monitoring system per se, but this is a pretty big deal. So I did want to add a slide about this. This is currently not effective. It will be next month. The big deal is an extreme lowering of 12 from the current 12 micrograms per meter cubed to 9. Those of you who don't typically deal with national ambient air quality standards, those are the standards that keep our environment and ourselves healthy. They are the ones that the background, the ambient must meet. And so why is that important to us or to our facilities? Because that can impact how we comply or the limits that our customers are required to meet. So in this case, for those of you all who do support new projects, maybe new units at sites or possibly new sites, this really can potentially impact your ability to get those permitted. Maybe ultimately there may be some additional limits or monitoring requirements. It's interesting from a monitoring standpoint because this information is gathered from monitoring systems, ambient air stations, and so there's a lot going on there. The states have a lot of work to do in order to show EPA through their state implementation plans that they will be able to meet these particular new limits. They're looking very closely at their data, and as I like to say, this makes data very important. People make decisions based on continuous monitoring data, and so we do see the states looking very closely at that. They do have some concern over potential high bias. I've seen a couple of presentations from states on this. There are things called exceptional events. Happens quite a lot in the West, also in the East, wildfires, and those can actually impact the data as well. So we typically don't look at this very closely or follow this from a continuous monitoring perspective for our customers, but I did want to put that in. And if you, there are a lot of really smart people out there, a lot of good consultants are following this very closely. So if you need more information, I can certainly send you in that direction to find out more about potential impacts to your operations. But just happened, pretty important stuff. National Ambient Air Quality Standards for Particulate Matter 2.5. So one of the other things that for someone like me who stalks the Federal Register and looks at it quite a bit is changes to state implementation plans, seeing I almost can't keep up with the approvals or disapprovals regarding startup and shutdown. I like to put this in here there's a regulatory thought there. I feel like it can almost be a sleeper rule and and come and get folks. So I hope that the majority of you are keeping an eyeball on any changes. Many of you, it's already a done deal. These changes have been made in your current states. Some maybe not. And so what I'm talking about is, when we think about startup emissions, shutdown emissions from industrial facilities, they often are much higher than normal operation. And in the past, facilities were allowed to exempt those from compliance. You didn't have to count them. And so that we've seen that change due to numerous numerous cases, different types of litigation throughout the years, and those things have been removed. Meaning, no, you do have to count them. You do have to comply with something. But the process is long. It takes a long time for those things to often be implemented. Certainly, some states are pushing back on that. We see, but ultimately, we do see that those being removed from the state's rules, from their implementation plans, and therefore, if they're removed from the state's rules, they're also going to be removed as options for you. This is important because this is something when we do evaluate your data acquisition system, we got to know a lot about this. Different states have different requirements on, well, what is a startup event? How long does it last? Is it 30 minutes? Is it, when you reach some sort of level state defined by this, that, or whatever? Are you allowed to exclude any of those emissions from your calculations? If so, do you exclude a whole hour of when you have a startup event, or is it by minute? We ask, these are important. It gets very complicated fairly quickly. We also want to know things from a input-output perspective, an I/O perspective. Well, how do you know? I mean, is it a signal coming from your DAS? Are there specific parameters that we need to know when you're in startup? I put the startup button there, the easy button. Yeah, that'd be great. Do you just push the startup button and it sends us a signal and we know, and then you push another button and when you're out of startup? There's just a lot of things going on there, and it certainly can impact your emissions. And we encourage you to think about those things. We encourage you, if you have these exemptions already, great, they might get removed. So keep an eye on your permits. And certainly if you are operating with the assumption that you have exemptions, and then suddenly you don't, that could be a big deal. So this one has been out there a while and is continuing to exist. So something very important to think about from your compliance as well as your data calculations in your systems. Okay, I did want to talk a bit about ECMPS 2.0 for those of you all who do reporting. This is a federal reporting. This is a tool that we who do air emissions reporting at the federal level use. We actually use our data systems to create we call it electronic data reports, or EDRs. Those EDRs include emissions. They include QA activities. They also dictate through a monitoring plan how our systems are set up and what we monitor and how that works. And ECMPS is, and we currently used to always just call it ECMPS, but now we call it 1.0. That's our current system. That system is being updated. It is going to a web-based system, and I'm going to show you. I've got an example of that. We are on top of this quite a bit, but there's a lot going on. We do know that it was originally, well, I don't want to say originally, it's supposed to have been here a long time ago, but most recently we're expecting to see the new system, which is web-based, happen this year, meaning starting 1/1/2024. We, due to things, long story with EPA, and many of you may have sat on some webinars with some updates earlier this year. We do know that they are not on schedule. We do, based on discussions that I have had with EPA, will be delayed till 2025. We do know that the format is changing from XML to a JSON format. In my opinion, we used to joke about XML. We called it the matrix. You know, if you could read it, difficult to read, to see. You do get used to it. JSON is, in my opinion, a little more simplified, and it does take less resources in order to make these reports, which makes it easier to upload to the web. Along with 2.0, there were new mercury air toxic standard reporting requirements. We also know that the LME, low mass emissions files, there is, for those of you who have LMEs, you can use the current 1.0 tool to generate your files. Not anymore with 2.0. And also something, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, regarding consultant access, that will not be supported by 2.0. So here, I'm going to go ahead and start my video. I think it's going to got rolling, and as you see some things change on the screen, this is the ECMPS, call it the reengineering website, also known as 2.0. I have, this is a beta site. This is not the live action site. I encourage you all who have not had an opportunity to go in and use this site, that it would be beneficial for you to do so. I'm actually logging into a beta. It is not production. There is data in this system. It is something to help you get familiar with how things work if you are the one who does the ECMPS reporting. And so I'm actually logging in here, total web-based. I like it. It welcomes me. Hi, Susan. Yeah, that makes me happy that it knows my name. But it is set up very similar to the 1.0 system. It looks different, but it has the same information, such as monitoring plans, QA, emissions. So I have several monitoring plans associated with my account. This is beta. I'm going to pick on, I'm not sure if they're on the call today, but I'm going to pick on Colorado Bend here, which is located in Texas. Just taking a look at the plan. Going to open it up. Slightly different. I won't say slightly, actually very different from the current tool that we use, the 1.0 tool. But here, the information in beta, and it will be ultimately in production, is the same. And so what you see here is just showing the actual location, which is the pipe, the unit. It can either be the unit, it can be the stack, and then details about that particular stack. And in this case, you can, this is where you screen where you could look at things. You can also do some editing this way. What we see here, what I'm trying to show, that some of the different things, I can't really edit those spans. So if I needed to update my range and span, we'll talk about that a little bit more. I can see it, but in this case, I can't update it. And I'm not exactly sure why. When I first did this, I'm like, oh, wait. I believe I figured out the record needs to actually be checked out in order to edit. And as you can see here, once we check out the record, we can edit it. So this is different from 1.0, which you can edit right in your tool. That we are on the web. You do need to check it back in once you make your edits. And if you say, "Ooh, I'm not really sure if I want to do that," it always does allow you to revert back to the original record. So just different ways of editing. And here, this is where we would put our QA data, those sort of things, whether that be a RADA, a flow to load, a flow, a primary element inspection, those sort of things. This is where we would find that information. We could edit it right here. The intent really will be that, and I don't have a demonstration of this, but ultimately we will use our data acquisition systems to create our files just as we do today, just in a different language, the JSON language, and we will upload those to this system and we will need to evaluate those similar to 1.0 as well. So just showing you an actual RADA here. And if I wanted to create a RADA, I could upload the file, or I can actually create it on the fly here within the system itself. So this is just me demonstrating how to do so fairly straightforward, I'd like to say, although EPA is still continuing to work on that. So many of you may be very familiar with this already, and my goal here is just to show this and how this would work once we start using it. Okay. And then I'll end by just showing some emissions, just very similar, as you can see, the same type of windows sort of over and over again. Emissions data, you do have to import all data, meaning if you have data that has been submitted, you would need to actually go and import that data from historical. So that's a little different than what we typically do with the 1.0 system. So showed you the little demonstration of the beta, and ultimately the production system will be very similar. I do want to let everyone know that our current systems from a data acquisition system standpoint, Prism and StackVision will be able to create JSON files. They already currently can. We do want you to know that EPA has confirmed that, at least at the moment, the last update, that they will maintain the current type of checks. And what does that mean? That means when you upload your file and you evaluate it, it lets you know if things are wrong. And those of us that do electronic formatting, there's all sorts of electronic formatting. And typically when you put information in, you need to check it to make sure that the bits and pieces are correct. But there won't be any new checks as well. Also, starting this quarter, last quarter, which the reporting month, you still have first quarter, remember, and the reporting month is this quarter. You do have new reporting requirements, specifically the semi-annual MATS reports that you would normally submit July, August timeframe. Those are now quarterly. And so it is the same information, but if you are currently submitting that, it's due. It's due this month. Also, we do see a requirement for if you have a particulate SIMS, that hourly data as well. A lot of people, I want to talk about this a little bit. I actually reached out to several folks. I don't have a lot of details in this slide on this, but lots of confusion about the MATS rule. And for those of you that are MATS affected, MATS plants, the rule states that there should be an XML report submitted this quarter, and which actually makes no sense because we don't have an XML schema. We don't have that from EPA to tell us how to make the XML. How is it supposed to be put together? So we don't have that. And so if we did, and I say we collectively, we'd be guessing at how that should look. What should that XML look like? And so what we have heard from, and I've talked to a lot of customers, what we've also heard from EPA, and EPA does confirm that the states are the compliance authority for MATS. And they have supported individuals reaching out to their states and requesting the ability to keep the status quo, meaning continuing to submit this information, these semi-annual reports, which are now quarterly, as PDF files as opposed to XML files. And many of the states are giving the okay. I will say I've talked to a lot of people, and there's some different perspectives on this issue with MATS, and we can talk about it, or we can answer some questions. Some people are doing that. They're getting the okay. They are going with status quo, and they're quite confident with that. Other customers in different states with different interpretations are not. They believe they need to be in it. It says XML. The rule says XML. That's what we're going to do. So we do see people submitting this information in that XML format, although it has no schema and it has no structure. So, but it doesn't meet the rules. So lots of different interpretations out there, and I've just talked to some different people. We at ESC Spectrum, we're here, to help you and help you provide guidance. But I will say, ultimately, you are the compliant. The compliance is on you, and this is per EPA a state involved issue. So I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. I've talked to many of you already. It's sort of unfortunate that things are not clearer for us, and I would love to hear from any of you who have any thoughts about that. I think it's good to keep all thoughts on the table, but this is the month where we have these new reporting requirements. So the other item that I did want to touch on, very important to us as data acquisition system vendors, is consultant access. Many of you who are in industry may not be aware of this, and I actually wasn't myself till I started working for ESC Spectrum. Those of us, in order to have access to your data systems, in order to work on them, from our standpoint, our reporting team, in order for our reporting team to actually support our reporting customers, meaning we go in, we pull the data, we edit the data, we help prepare those reports for submittal. We have access to your systems. We have access to the public information via ECMPS 1.0, and we are called consultant access. It allows us to have up to 50 facilities access to those. Makes things very easy for us to be able to grab your information, work on your information, see your previous submittals, etc. But we do know that that particular access will not be supported by the 2.0. Why is this important? And those of you who have been doing KMD, ECMPS for a while, we're sort of taking a step backwards, meaning we will have to get you to add us as agents, as preparers, those sort of things to your 2.0 system so that we can work for you. So, and that involves getting with your responsible official, your designated representative. Some people may say, oh, not a big deal. Others, maybe they travel a lot, the DR, plant manager always seems to be out of town, those sort of things. It can be a little more difficult. But every single person who works on your system, whether they be a reporting person, reporting engineer from our site, or a support engineer, or one who may be adding one of our data acquisition engineers who is designing and adding new units to your system, they you would need to give them access, meaning have your DR give them access. So this one is going to make our lives a little more difficult, and we've been pretty vocal with EPA about this, and they agree, but they don't have the resources to address it. So we will be reaching out to you all moving forward with the 2.0 when it does come. And then I do want to remind folks also that those sites who do not monitor directly their emissions because they qualify as a low mass emitter, the current 1.0, you can create your files there. 2.0 will not have that functionality, but we do have a reporting team that provides reporting services to lots of customers. Many of you may be on the phone here. We are providing a service for those systems where you send us your files. And I'll say we do have LMEs that with the 1.0 that we do service currently, and they send us their files. We review them, check them for mistakes, work with the customer if necessary, and then we use the current 1.0 to create those files for the customers, and we send them back to them. With respect to the 2.0, we will provide the same service to our current customers, but then we're also offering that service to those who are not our current customers, where we will take the files, use an internal tool that we have to create the JSONs and send them back to the customer. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us. Our business development managers are well versed in this, and so they can certainly help you with that. Do want to touch on a couple of regulatory things before we close out today. This is something as a reminder when you do have your equipment for monitoring your emissions per Part 75. We do know that you have a requirement to set your span and range. And I always like to say, I always have to think, what's the difference between span and range? Range, simply range is 2 numbers, span is 1, right? Range is there's a low number for your equipment and a high number for your emissions um, recording equipment. And you really need to set those based on what your emissions are. And so that the majority of your readings are between 20% and 80%. Typically, you start off with some expected maximum potential concentrations, some expected maximum emissions concentrations, or maximum potential flow that to help you set those span and ranges. Our SIMS designers that work here, this is very important to them when they're trying to provide a proposal to you or design your system as well. These are reflected in the monitoring plan. Does impact the types of calibration gases, and should have probably bolded this. I didn't. There's an annual reevaluation. We do see that a lot of people forget about that, and we do see EPA audit this. This is pretty easy to audit from afar. So as a reminder, there is an annual reevaluation. We do see some of our reporting customers, EPA will reach out to them and say, hey, it looks like your span and range is a little too low or a little too high, etc. So don't forget about this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. Also, like to talk about quality assurance, quality control plans. Just one slide on this one, but don't forget about these either. We have lots of technicians, really well qualified technicians, and I'll confess, they tell me they walk into a sim shelter and there's a book that says QAQC. Looks like it hasn't been touched in years, so that's not good. These are plans that are required for your Part 60 systems, or sometimes we call that permit systems. They are also required for Part 75. There's lots of information there. They do need to be kept up to date. If you haven't opened it in a while, look at it. Maybe you don't need to update it annually. Maybe you don't need to update it every 6 months. But certainly if you have a good suggestion is if you get a new Title V permit, which regulates your emissions, that's every 5 years. Yeah, maybe take a look at the QAQC as well. There may be some new limits. Your QAQC needs to reflect your current site. If you've had some units shut down, some new ones come, you've converted from coal to natural gas, you've got a new NOx monitor that's a different model, might have some different requirements there. So I like the words easy to audit. Yep. If you look at a Part 75 audit, and we've seen our customers, that's what they want to look at. Give me your quality assurance, quality control plan. This is something that says who's responsible for what and what you're going to be doing at the site. So don't forget about them. Also want to touch a little bit on monitoring plans. I've mentioned them before with ECMPS 1.0, which is the top picture there. And then I did show you down below, these monitoring plans are available online. We can look up anyone's just through a website. They do require specific things. There are electronic requirements in the rule, as well as hard copy requirements in the rule. And we do have specific things. They tell you how you are what you're going to measure and how you're going to measure it. And there are specifics about serial numbers, lots of detail, lots of weedy type of information, but they are important. So don't forget about your monitoring plans. And one thing that we do see is, and as a reminder, I got to see a good presentation on this less than a year ago, your hard copy monitoring plans. I think we as an industry sort of forgotten what that means. And so I'm going to remind you all about that. It is not, for those who do ECMPS, it is not a printout or a PDF of your electronic monitoring plan, although that's part of it. The hard copy does have specific requirements for these things you see there regarding your test strategies. How was that MPC and MEC, those maximum concentrations determined? Does require schematics, diagrams. They can be fairly straightforward. It likes to know data flow diagram. What is Appendix D? That refers to typically natural gas systems that use an alternate calculation. They don't directly measure SO2, so they're allowed to use fuel flow information and default factors in order to report SO2. So if those are applicable, there's some details about that. And then we also see if you do have a new system that it does require monitoring. Hard copy requires submittal prior to initial cert or recertification. And I've got the next bullet there. Also within 30 days of any other event in which there is a change associated. So encourage you to look at that. I'm not going to go into that too much. We don't necessarily see that very often, but it certainly needs to be kept up to date. It's once again easy to audit. If you look at a Part 75 audit checklist, it's on there. So don't forget about your hard copies. They should be somewhere in your compliance record systems. So speaking about an EPA audit, reminder, we are seeing our customers being audited by EPA. In the olden days, traditionally, EPA may just show up at your site and audit you. But there's different levels of audits, 3 levels of audits. Many of them can do the audit from anywhere in the country. They can audit your records that you submit. That's fairly common. When I worked for the utility, was subject to some basic emissions audits. But these audits, they do review things like the audit history. If they do come to the site or they do send you some questions, they want to make sure the SIMS people know. If you're a SIMS technician or you're responsible for the SIMS, you have an understanding of what your responsibilities are. You know what the QA/QC plan is. Your record keeping does need to be organized. They do want to know who is the designated representative. Your QA/QC should be up to date for who that is. It doesn't have to identify an individual, and I would actually recommend putting a name down, but it should identify a position. Is that your plant manager? Is that your vice president, etc.? Also, they would, make sure that where the EDRs come from. What is that exactly? And I do like this one. And I've said it several times. ECMPS do people even know what that is and why we have a SIM system? Why it's here? Why it's important? So these are the things. Just some of the things. I will say we do have a lot of resources on our website regarding EPA audit and checklists and things that you can refer to. So feel free to either reach out to us or take a look at that on your own. And I'm getting towards the end of my presentation here. I do like to remind you all about Title V permits. We do not submit applications for Title Vs. We look at a lot of Title Vs, and the intent of the Title V permit is to bring together all of those amazing rules out there and requirements into one document. And as you can see by the representations, whether they be standards from Part 60 or Part 63 or Part 75 or issues with non-attainment issues. I mentioned the PM, National Ambient Air Quality Standard, state implementation rules, those state implementation plan rules, those plans that are submitted and approved by EPA. Often they'll reference specific facilities and showing that there are limits for specific facilities. Lots of stuff going on within a Title V permit potentially. We here at ESC Spectrum do read a lot of Title V permits, and our focus really with Title V is looking at limits, typically renewed every 5 years. They do impact your monitoring plans. They can impact your monitoring plans, your QA/QC, as I mentioned earlier. They can impact your configurations. We review them. We look at the SIMS requirements, the emissions requirements, and we see how things are calculated. Is it an hourly limit? Is it a 3 hourly limit? Is it a 24 hourly limit? Those sort of things. What does the data acquisition system need to record and produce as a report? Those sort of things is what we look at. We do that as part of any data acquisition system project, but I do want to say that, and I mean new project, new unit, those sort of things. But we also do, offer service for existing facilities that maybe haven't changed. Maybe they got a new permit, or maybe they just haven't thought about it in a while. So we do have that service as well. And it can be very helpful, especially if you might be a new person at the site and you don't know what's going on. And it's helpful to go review those permits and actually review your system to see if there are any changes that may be needed. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. I guess, Reagan, I don't know if we have any questions or any discussion items from our audience.
Yes, we do have a few questions. The first one is going to be, is new PM limit in effect? 0.01 pounds per, I threw it up on the screen.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, to my knowledge, that is not in effect. I have not seen a final rule from MATS. If someone has seen it, please let me know. But so far, I've not seen that one finalized yet.
Our next one is concentration or mass emission exclusions. And this was in regards to the startup and shutdown slide, number 11.
Okay. I probably might need a little bit, hi Gabriella, that might need a little bit more information on that. We see exclusion can be different depending upon what the permit allows, meaning those startup emissions could be excluded from the current limit, and I'm just going to throw in, let's say the limit is 0.2 while the unit is in normal operation, but during startup, the 0.2 doesn't apply, meaning you can pull those out. And that 0.2, could be, when you say mass emissions, it could be 0.2 tons, could be, typically we might see a rate, ppm potentially. It varies. So hopefully that answers your questions, and certainly we can talk about that a little bit more, and we can certainly look at your specific permit. But that's what I was referring to. But it's can be quite complicated and different and site to site, which is why we like to talk about that with our customers.
Okay. Our next one, can you please comment on the recent court decision about this incredible acronym?
The startup shutdown malfunction state implementation call. I cannot comment a lot about that. I did see that there are quite a few that are floating around. I think I may even have a few notes on that. But at this time, I probably would not be the right person to actually talk about court decisions. So I'm probably just reading it very similar to you all, but certainly I can refer you to perhaps someone who has more legal background than I do on that.
Beautiful. That was all the questions that we had. Okay. I wanted to remind everybody that obviously this recording will be added to our customer community. It usually takes us about a week. And then if you don't want to wait that long, then you should be able to access the recording after the webinar has concluded with your registration link. I've thrown up a little link to register for the rest of our spring training series sessions. You can click that and register for the rest of those. If anybody has any additional questions, you can throw them in the chat box or in the question pane. I want to thank Susan so much for being kind of our guinea pig for our new crowdcast. I think you did a great job. And we really love to see everybody interacting in the chat. So keep it up for our next spring training sessions. And then, we do have, Josh Whitaker. I think this might be just to everybody in here, but I'll throw it up on the screen about MATS PM hourly reports.
He seems to be answering the group. So
there we go.
anybody
Cindy
have
wants
any?
to know, can you say who told you ECMPS 2.0 won't kick in until 2025?
Yes. It was Chris Worley, I believe, confirmed that we would not see it this year for 2024. And I don't think that's a surprise.
There
But
you
that
have
I
it.
haven't seen it in writing, so y'all know how that goes. This is us chatting. But I don't think we're surprised about that, given we haven't heard anything so far.
Beautiful. We're spilling all the secrets here today.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Well, I think that was pretty much all the questions. Making sure. Yeah, I think we're good to go. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.